Miguel appeared in the kitchen doorway, dish towel in hand. He and Evelyn exchanged a glance. The diner rarely saw bikers, especially not Hell's Angels. The main routes they traveled were miles away. "Take any seat you like," Evelyn said, reaching for a menu. "Coffee's fresh and the special today is meatloaf." The man nodded, choosing a booth near the back with a clear view of both exits. As he slid in, he winced, his hand never leaving his side. "You all right there?" Evelyn asked, setting down a mug and filling it with coffee. "Fine," he replied, his voice gravelly but not unkind. "Bike skidded on a curve about a mile back. Nothing broken, just bruised. That's some weather to be riding in. Didn't start out this bad." He wrapped his hands around the mug, and Evelyn noticed the road rash on his knuckles. "I'm Evelyn. That's Miguel in the kitchen. You passing through or staying in town?" "Ray," he offered after a pause. "Just passing through. Headed north. Food before you go?" Miguel makes a mean burger. Ray seemed to relax slightly. "Burger sounds good. Thanks." Evelyn jotted down the order and passed it to Miguel, who had been watching the exchange carefully. She gave him a reassuring nod. "Our visitor's having a burger," she said, "and maybe a towel if we can spare one." Miguel's protective stance softened. "Fries too, I'm guessing?" "The works," Evelyn confirmed. She grabbed a clean dish towel from under the counter and brought it to Ray's table. Not much, but it might help. He accepted it with a nod of thanks, using it to wipe his face and beard. "Appreciate it." The elderly couple paid their bill and hurried out during a brief lull in the rain, casting curious glances at Ray as they left. Now it was just the three of them, Evelyn, Miguel, and their unexpected guest. Evelyn busied herself wiping down tables, giving Ray space while keeping him in her peripheral vision. There was something in his demeanor that spoke of caution rather than threat. The way he positioned himself in the booth, how his eyes regularly swept the parking lot through the window. He wasn't looking to cause trouble. He was looking out for it. Miguel brought out the burger, a towering creation with crispy bacon, melted cheese, and his secret sauce. "Careful, plate's hot," he warned, setting it down. Ray looked at the food with genuine appreciation. "Been a while since I had a real meal, thanks." Outside, the storm intensified. Lightning split the sky, followed almost immediately by a crack of thunder that shook the windows. The rain turned sideways, driven by gusting winds. "Going nowhere in that?" Miguel commented, glancing outside. "Storm's supposed to pass through quickly," Evelyn said, refilling Ray's coffee. "Should clear up in an hour or so." Ray took a bite of his burger, closing his eyes briefly at the taste. For the first time since he'd entered, he seemed to truly relax. "This is good," he said simply. "Miguel's secret is the butter on the bun before grilling," Evelyn confided. "Don't tell him I told you," Miguel snorted from behind the counter. "Like that's my only secret." The easy banter seemed to further reassure Ray, who continued eating with the focus of someone who hadn't seen a proper meal in days. The lights flickered once, then again. Evelyn reached under the counter for the flashlight she kept stashed there. "Power goes out a lot during storms," she explained. "Old wiring in this part of town." As if on cue, the diner went dark, save for the gray light filtering through the windows. Evelyn clicked on a flashlight. "Perfect timing," she said, setting the light upright on the counter to cast a warm glow through the room. "Miguel, check the circuit box." Miguel disappeared into the back with another flashlight. Ray continued eating, seemingly unfazed by the darkness. "You get used to the unexpected on the road," he said when Evelyn looked his way. "Been riding long?" "Most of my life." He pushed his empty plate aside. "Started after I got back from my second tour overseas. Needed the freedom, I guess." "Military?" Ray nodded. "Army, 10 years." Something in his tone told Evelyn not to press further. She understood boundaries. Everyone who walked into her diner carried their own story, and not all chapters were meant to be shared. Miguel returned, shaking his head. "Power's out in the whole block. Saw the transformer blow down the street." Evelyn sighed. "Well, looks like we're closing early tonight. Cash register won't work anyway." She began the routine of shutting down, covering food, checking burners were off, securing the day's earnings in the small safe in her office. Ray watched, occasionally glancing out at the parking lot where the rain continued to pound. "What do I owe you?" he asked, reaching for his wallet. Evelyn waved him off. "On the house tonight. Consider it a sorry you crashed your bike discount." For the first time, Ray smiled, a brief upward tilt of his mouth that transformed his face. Thank you. Not everyone's so kind to folks like me. Folks like you. People see the patch, they make assumptions. He gestured to his Hell's Angels vest. Well, in my diner, we judge people by how they treat others, not by what they wear. Evelyn began blowing out the candles Miguel had placed around the diner. Though I admit you gave Mrs. Peterson quite a start. She probably hasn't been this excited since the church bake sale scandal of 2018. Ray raised an eyebrow. Someone used store-bought pie crust, Evelyn explained with mock seriousness. Very controversial. A genuine laugh escaped Ray, but it quickly turned into a wince as he pressed his hand against his side again. Evelyn frowned. You sure you're okay? That looks like more than just a bruise. Before Ray could answer, headlights swept across the darkened diner. 2 vehicles pulled into the parking lot, their blue and red lights cutting through the rain. Police, Miguel said, peering through the window. Ray stiffened, his face instantly guarded. He slid further into the shadows of the booth. Evelyn noticed the change. Friends of yours? Not exactly. His voice had lost all warmth. The police cars parked directly in front of the entrance, their headlights aimed at the door. Evelyn could make out 2 officers in each vehicle reaching for rain gear. Look, Ray said quietly. I don't want to bring trouble to your place. I should go. In this weather? With those ribs? Evelyn shook her head. Besides, there's no back exit that wouldn't take you right past them. The officers were approaching the door now, hunched against the rain. Evelyn made a quick decision. Miguel, take our guest to the storage pantry. Give me a minute with our boys in blue. Miguel hesitated only briefly before nodding to Ray. This way. Ray stood carefully, keeping to the shadows. You don't have to do this. You don't even know me. I know enough, Evelyn said firmly. Go on now. As Miguel led Ray through the swinging kitchen doors, Evelyn straightened her apron and moved to the entrance. She opened it just as the first officer raised his hand to knock. Evening, officers. What brings you out in this weather? Her voice was pleasant but not inviting. The taller officer stepped forward, water streaming from his hat. Sorry to bother you, ma'am. We're looking for someone. Mind if we come in? Lightning flashed, illuminating the 4 police officers. 2 she recognized from town, and 2 she didn't. Their hands rested casually near their holsters, but there was nothing casual about their expressions. Evelyn stood her ground in the doorway, thinking of the stranger in her pantry and the tension in his body when the police arrived. Something wasn't right here. In her 60 years, she'd learned to trust her instincts about people. Well, she said, leaning against the doorframe. That depends on who you're looking for and why. The power's out, as you can see. We're closed, the officers exchanged glances. Behind them, the storm raged on, but Evelyn sensed that the real tempest was just beginning. Rain pounded on the metal awning above as Evelyn stood her ground in the doorway. The 4 police officers before her seemed more annoyed than concerned about the downpour soaking through their uniforms. Ma'am, we need to check your establishment, said the officer who had spoken before. His nameplate read Jenkins. We're tracking a suspect in an assault case. Evelyn recognized Jenkins. He'd been on the force about 5 years, had a reputation for being overzealous. The officer beside him, Ramirez, was local too. The other 2, one stocky with a crew cut, one tall with cold eyes, she'd never seen before. An assault case? In our little town? Evelyn raised her eyebrows, not budging from the doorway. Who got hurt? Jenkins' jaw tightened. That's police business. We have reason to believe the suspect might be here. Well, as you can see, the power's out. I was just closing up. It's only me and Miguel tonight. Then you won't mind if we come in and check, said the tall officer, moving forward as if the matter was settled. Evelyn didn't step aside. 60 years of living had taught her when something felt off, and this felt way off. These men weren't just doing their jobs. There was an eagerness to them, a tension that spoke of something personal. Actually, I do mind, she said evenly, unless you have a warrant or can tell me exactly who you're looking for and why. The officers exchanged glances. We're looking for a Hell's Angel, Ramirez finally offered. Big guy, beard, probably injured, involved in a bar fight downtown. Assaulted an officer. Evelyn thought of Ray in her pantry, his hand pressed to his side, the wariness in his eyes when the police lights appeared. She thought of her late husband, Robert, who'd taught her that doing right wasn't always the same as following rules. A warrant shouldn't be hard to get, she said mildly. I'll wait while you go sort that out. Jenkins stepped closer, lowering his voice. Miss Carter, you don't want to interfere with police business. If you're hiding someone— Hiding? Evelyn gave a short laugh. Officer Jenkins, this diner has 12 booths and a counter. Not exactly a lot of hiding spots, but this is still my property, and without a warrant or an emergency, you boys are staying outside until I've closed up proper. Lightning flashed, followed by a boom of thunder that seemed to emphasize her words. In that brief illumination, she caught something in the tall officer's expression, a flash of anger that made her stomach tighten. Ms. Carter, the stocky officer began, his tone reasonable. We're not looking to cause trouble. If the suspect isn't here, a quick look around and we'll be on our way. And if he is? Evelyn countered. What then? No one answered directly, which was answer enough. I'll tell you what, Evelyn said. I need to finish closing up. You fellas go get your warrant and I'll make sure the place is all ready for your search when you get back. I'll even put on a fresh pot of coffee. She began to close the door, but Jenkins stuck his boot in the gap. This isn't a negotiation, he said. The pretense of politeness was gone now. Step aside. Miguel appeared behind Evelyn, dish towel still in his hands. Everything okay, Miss Evelyn? Just fine, Miguel. The officers were just leaving to get a warrant. She stared at Jenkins' foot, still blocking her door. Weren't you, officer? A tense silence followed, broken only by the drumming of rain. Finally, Ramirez put a hand on Jenkins' shoulder. Come on, he muttered. Not worth it. We'll do this by the book. Reluctantly, Jenkins removed his foot. We'll be back, he said, voice low. And if we find out you're harboring a fugitive, you'll be facing charges too. I look forward to your return, Evelyn said pleasantly. With that warrant. She closed the door firmly and turned the lock, then watched through the rain-streaked glass as the officers retreated to their vehicles. Only when the red taillights disappeared down the road did she let out the breath she'd been holding. They're gone for now, she said, turning to Miguel. That was brave, Miguel said, but maybe not smart. Those weren't just local cops. I noticed. Evelyn moved away from the windows. Where's our guest? Miguel led her to the pantry where Ray sat on a flour sack, his expression unreadable. You didn't have to do that, he said as they entered. Maybe not, Evelyn agreed. But I've never been a fan of bullies with badges. Ray studied her. You don't know me. I could be exactly what they said, a criminal, an assaulter. Are you? Ray's gaze didn't waver. No, but they'll be back and with a warrant next time. I should go. In this storm with those ribs? I don't think so. Evelyn crossed her arms. Besides, they'll be watching the roads. Best to wait it out. Miguel cleared his throat. My cousin has a cabin about 20 minutes from here. If we could get him there— First things first, Evelyn said decisively. Let's look at those ribs. Despite Ray's protests, they moved to the kitchen where the emergency lights provided better illumination. With reluctance, he lifted his shirt to reveal a nasty bruise spreading across his side. Doesn't look broken, Miguel said, but that's going to hurt for a while. Evelyn fetched the first aid kit she kept in the office. Want to tell us what really happened? She asked as she handed Ray some painkillers and a bottle of water. Ray accepted them with a nod of thanks. Like they said, there was a fight at O'Malley's bar, but I didn't start it. He swallowed the pills. I was having a quiet drink when those same cops came in. They were off duty, had been drinking. Started hassling a homeless guy who'd come in to get out of the rain. Let me guess, Miguel said. You stepped in. The homeless guy was a vet. Had his dog tag still. When I saw them push him around, Ray shrugged, then winced at the movement. Guess I've got a problem with authority figures picking on people who can't fight back. So what happened? Evelyn asked, applying a cold pack to Ray's side. I told them to back off. They didn't like that, especially coming from someone like me. He gestured to his vest. Words were exchanged. Then more than words. And the assault on an officer? Ray's expression hardened. After I pulled them off the old guy, one of them took a swing at me. I defended myself. That's it. Evelyn and Miguel exchanged glances. It wasn't hard to believe. Jenkins had always had a temper, and alcohol would only make it worse. They're looking to make an example, Ray continued. Hell's Angels passing through their town, getting involved in their business. They don't need much excuse. The lights flickered, then came back on. The sudden brightness made them all blink. Perfect timing, Evelyn said. Miguel, call your cousin about that cabin. Ray, there's a cot in the storage room upstairs. You can rest there until Miguel's cousin arrives. I appreciate the help, but I don't want to drag you into this. Too late for that, Evelyn said with a small smile. I already kicked 4 cops off my property. I'd say I'm involved. While Miguel made the call, Evelyn showed Ray to the small storage room above the diner. It was cramped but clean, with a folding cot she kept for the rare occasions when weather made it impossible to drive home. It's not much, she apologized. It's more than I expected, Ray replied, lowering himself carefully onto the cot. Why are you helping me? Evelyn paused in the doorway. 10 years ago, my son had some trouble. Nothing major, but enough to get the attention of the police. One officer in particular decided Brian was guilty before any evidence came in. Made his life hell for months. What happened? Another officer, a good one, stepped in, made sure things were done right. Brian was cleared. She looked Ray in the eye. I believe in giving people the benefit of the doubt, and I believe in standing up when something doesn't seem right. Ray nodded slowly. Your son's lucky to have you. He'd say the same about the officer who gave him a fair shake. Evelyn stepped back. Rest. Miguel's working on getting you somewhere safer. When she returned downstairs, Miguel was just hanging up the phone. Luis will be here in an hour, he said, taking back roads to avoid the police. Good. Evelyn glanced out the window. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle, and distant lightning illuminated the clouds from within. Now we wait. They busied themselves with closing tasks, counting the till, prepping for tomorrow, wiping down surfaces. Neither spoke much, both aware that the night was far from over. A car door slammed outside. Evelyn moved quickly to the window. A police cruiser had returned, parking across the street with its lights off. Inside, a shadowy figure watched the diner. They're not waiting for a warrant, she said quietly. Miguel came to look. They'll stop anyone leaving. Then we need a distraction. Evelyn straightened her shoulders. I'm going to pay a visit to the station. Have a word with the chief about his officer's behavior. That's too risky, Miguel protested. Not as risky as what those men might do if they catch Ray alone. Evelyn's tone brooked no argument. You get him to that cabin when Luis arrives. I'll keep the attention on me. She climbed the stairs to inform Ray of the plan. He listened silently, his face shadowed in the dim light. These aren't your problems, he said finally. Why put yourself at risk for a stranger? Evelyn thought about it for a moment. My husband used to say that doing the easy thing and doing the right thing rarely line up. And I've never been one for taking the easy road. Ray held her gaze, then nodded once. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Evelyn said. We've still got to get you out of here in one piece. As she headed back downstairs, Evelyn felt a familiar mix of fear and determination. The night was about to get complicated, and there was no guarantee of a happy ending. But she'd faced worse odds before sometimes. Standing your ground was its own victory. Evelyn's old Buick pulled out of the alley behind Sweet Home Diner, headlights cutting through the lingering drizzle. In the rearview mirror, she watched the police cruiser's engine start up. Just as she'd hoped, the officer inside seemed more interested in her movements than watching the diner. Let's see how far you'll follow me, she murmured. Turning onto Main Street, the cruiser pulled out after her, keeping a steady distance. Evelyn drove exactly at the speed limit, heading toward the police station downtown. Her hands were steady on the wheel despite the flutter in her chest. It had been years since she'd done anything that might be considered rebellious. But some instincts never faded. Meanwhile, back at the diner, Miguel watched from the darkened window as both vehicles disappeared around a corner. He pulled out his cell phone. She's drawn them away, he told Ray, who had come downstairs once the coast was clear. Luis should be here in 20 minutes. Ray nodded, lowering himself carefully into a booth. His side was still tender, but the painkillers had taken the edge off. Your boss is something else, he said. Ms. Evelyn? Miguel smiled slightly. Yeah, she is. Doesn't look like much would scare her, but you should have seen how nervous she was when the health inspector showed up last year. The small talk eased some of the tension as they waited. Ray reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, turning it over in his hands. You want to know why those cops are really after me? He asked suddenly. Miguel paused in his task of wiping down the counter. I figured you'd tell us if you wanted to. I think you both deserve to know, considering what you're risking. Ray unlocked his phone and held it out. I have evidence they don't want getting out. Miguel sat down across from Ray, taking the phone. On the screen was a paused video. He pressed play. The footage was dark but clear enough. The back alley behind O'Malley's bar. Officers Jenkins and the tall cop from earlier had a man pinned against the wall. The man was elderly, disheveled, clearly homeless. A small dog cowered nearby. "I told you to stay out of town," Jenkins was saying, his voice slurred but threatening. "This place isn't for your kind." The old man was trying to speak, but a hand around his throat cut off his words. "He wasn't bothering anyone," came Ray's voice from behind the camera. "Let him go." The officers turned, startled. The tall one reached for his hip despite being in civilian clothes. "Mind your own business." "Piker trash," he snarled. The video showed Ray stepping forward, the camera angle shifting as he pocketed his phone but continued recording. The confrontation escalated quickly, the officers aggressive, Ray trying to de-escalate but standing his ground. When the old man tried to slip away, Jenkins grabbed him roughly. Ray intervened, pushing Jenkins back. The other officer threw the first punch, catching Ray in the ribs. The fight was brief but intense, ending when Ray managed to knock both men back long enough to help the old man escape. "You're dead," the tall officer spat, blood streaming from his nose. "You don't know who you're messing with." The video ended there. Miguel looked up, his expression grim. "They're afraid this will get out," he said. It wasn't a question. Ray nodded, taking his phone back. "I sent a copy to my lawyer, but they must have been tracking my phone. They found me before I could get far enough out of town." "Does the old man have a name? Someone who could back up your story?" "Well, Vietnam vet. Lives in his car with his dog most of the time." Ray's expression softened slightly. "Good man. Doesn't deserve what those thugs were doing." Miguel was about to respond when headlights swept across the parking lot. They both tensed, but it was Luis's battered pickup truck, not another police cruiser. "That's our ride," Miguel said, relief evident in his voice. "Let's get you out of here." Across town, Evelyn sat in Police Chief Patterson's office, her umbrella dripping onto the linoleum floor. Chief Patterson was a heavyset man in his 50s who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else at this hour. "Let me get this straight," he said, rubbing his temples. "You're saying 4 of my officers tried to enter your property without a warrant, then stationed surveillance outside your diner after you refused?" "That's exactly what I'm saying, Richard." Evelyn had known the chief since he was a rookie. "And I want to know what kind of operation you're running where officers think that's acceptable." Patterson sighed. "2 of those men aren't mine, Evelyn. They're county working some special task force. Came in this afternoon looking for some biker they say assaulted Jenkins and Decker at O'Malley's." "And you believe that story?" Patterson's hesitation told her everything. "Jenkins has had issues before," he admitted. "But an assault is an assault. If this biker laid hands on an officer, what if the officer laid hands first?" Evelyn interrupted. "What if there's evidence?" The chief's eyes narrowed. "What are you not telling me, Evelyn?" Before she could answer, the door opened and Officer Ramirez stepped in, looking uncomfortable. "Sir, the surveillance unit lost Ms. Carter's car, then found it parked here. And," he hesitated, glancing at Evelyn, "we just got a call. Someone matching our suspect's description was spotted leaving town on Route 16. Patterson looked between them. "Well, go check it out." Ramirez nodded and retreated. When the door closed, the chief fixed Evelyn with a stern look. "Whatever you're involved in, I hope it's worth it." Evelyn met his gaze steadily. "It's about doing what's right, Richard. Something you used to care about, too." Back on Route 16, Luis's pickup bumped along a narrow dirt road that branched off the highway. Ray sat silently in the passenger seat, eyes scanning the darkness out of habit. "Almost there," Luis said. "Can't see the cabin from the main road. You'll be safe until things cool down." Ray nodded his thanks. The truck rounded a bend and a small cabin appeared, nestled among pine trees. It was rustic but solid-looking, with a covered porch and dark windows. "My fishing getaway," Luis explained as he parked. "No one will look for you here." Inside, the cabin was simple. 1 room with a kitchenette, a couch that folded out to a bed, and a small bathroom. A wood stove sat cold in the corner. "I'll get a fire going," Luis said. Miguel packed some food and first aid supplies. He nodded to a bag on the counter. Ray stood in the middle of the room, suddenly looking out of place in his leather vest and mud-splattered jeans. "I don't know how to thank you both." "Thank Ms. Evelyn," Miguel said. This was her call. As if summoned by her name, Miguel's phone rang. Evelyn's voice came through, sounding tired but relieved. "The police took the bait," she said. "They're searching the highway now. Is everyone safe?" "We're at the cabin," Miguel confirmed. "No one followed us." "Good. There was a pause. "Ray, are you there?" Miguel handed the phone to Ray. "I'm here," Ray said. "Your distraction worked, for now," Evelyn cautioned. "But we need a more permanent solution. I spoke with Chief Patterson. He's a decent man underneath all that bureaucracy. If he saw that video evidence, it's risky," Ray said. "Those county cops have friends. This could blow back on all of you." "Maybe," Evelyn acknowledged. "But doing nothing is riskier. Those men will keep abusing their power if no one stands up to them." There was quiet, determination in her voice that reminded Ray of other fighters he'd known, people who stood their ground not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. "My lawyer's name is Daniel Chen," Ray said finally. "I'll text you his number. He has a copy of the video too." "Good, I'll contact him in the morning." Evelyn paused. "Ray, do you know where Walt might be? The man from the video?" "He usually parks behind the community center. Volunteers there sometimes. I'll find him. Between his testimony, the video, and a decent lawyer, we might just have a chance." After the call ended, Ray stood by the cabin's small window, watching rain drip from the eaves. Luis had gone outside to secure the truck and Miguel was heating soup on the small stove. "Your boss is taking an awful risk," Ray said when Miguel approached with a steaming mug. "For a stranger." "That's just her way," Miguel replied. "Been like that as long as I've known her. Her husband was the same before he passed." Ray accepted the mug with a nod of thanks. "People like that are rare, getting rarer." Miguel glanced toward the window. "But they're still out there." Back at her home, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea gone cold. The house felt especially empty tonight, the silence broken only by the occasional drip from the leaky faucet she'd been meaning to fix. On the table before her lay an old photo, Robert in his younger days, standing proud beside their new diner. He'd always had a strong sense of justice, a willingness to help others that sometimes bordered on recklessness. She'd balanced him then, brought caution to his impulses. Now here she was in her 60s, taking the kinds of risks that would have made even Robert think twice. "What would you say about all this, old man?" she murmured to the photo. The house offered no answer, but Evelyn didn't really need one. She knew what Robert would say, that sometimes the right path wasn't the safe one, that standing up for others was never wasted effort, even when it came with a cost. She reached for her phone and pulled up the contact for Daniel Chen, attorney at law. It was too late to call tonight, but first thing tomorrow they'd begin building their case. Outside, the storm had finally passed. The air felt clean, renewed. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for tonight at least, everyone was safe. Sometimes, Evelyn thought as she finally headed to bed. That was victory enough. Morning light filtered through the blinds as Evelyn flipped the sign on Sweet Home Diner's door to open. After the previous night's drama, the ordinary routine felt both comforting and somehow strange, like putting on an old sweater that no longer quite fit. "Any word from our friend?" Miguel asked as he fired up the grill. Evelyn shook her head. "Not since last night, but I spoke with his lawyer this morning. Mr. Chen is quite interested in what we have to say." The breakfast crowd trickled in, regulars mostly, plus a few truckers passing through. Evelyn poured coffee and took orders, but her mind kept wandering to the cabin in the woods and the man hiding there. She'd set something in motion, and there was no turning back now. Around 10, Chief Patterson walked in. He sat at the counter without a word and waited until Evelyn approached. "Coffee?" she asked, pot already in hand. "And answers," he replied quietly. "My office received an interesting email this morning. Video of 2 of my officers harassing a homeless man. Care to explain how that landed in my inbox?" Evelyn poured his coffee, keeping her expression neutral. "Sounds like someone's looking for justice. Sounds like someone's poking a hornet's nest." Patterson added cream to his cup. "Jenkins and Decker have been suspended pending investigation. The county officers are furious. And Walt, the homeless veteran?" Patterson looked up, surprised. "We found him. He's reluctant to talk, but when he heard we had video evidence, he agreed to give a statement." He sipped his coffee. "You know, obstruction of justice is a serious charge. So is police brutality," Evelyn countered. They studied each other for a long moment. The biker, Ray Thompson. "Where is he?" Patterson finally asked. "Somewhere safe." Patterson sighed. "Tell him the charges have been dropped. He's free to go, but I'd appreciate a formal statement." Evelyn allowed herself a small smile. "I'll pass that along. This isn't over, you know." Patterson stood, leaving cash for his untouched coffee. Those county boys have friends in high places, and Jenkins has family on the town council. I'm aware of the risks, Evelyn said, meeting his gaze steadily. Patterson shook his head. You always were stubborn even back in high school. Just watch your back, Evelyn. After he left, Evelyn called Ray with the news. His relief was evident even through the phone. I can't thank you enough, he said. Chen says the video's being taken seriously. There might even be an internal investigation. Good. Evelyn glanced out the window where Patterson's cruiser was pulling away. Chief says you're free to go, but they'd like a statement. I'll stop by the station on my way out of town. There was a pause, then Ray added, You took a big risk for me. Not many people would do that. Maybe there should be more who would. Evelyn replied simply. They said their goodbyes, and Evelyn returned to work, feeling lighter. By the afternoon, news of the suspended officers had spread through town. Some customers gave her curious looks and she overheard whispers, but no one confronted her directly. Tanya arrived for her shift, eyes wide with excitement. Auntie, is it true? You harbored a fugitive biker and got 2 cops suspended. Don't believe everything you hear, Evelyn said, though her lips twitched with amusement. And he wasn't a fugitive. The day continued normally, though customer numbers seemed slightly higher than usual, curiosity drawing some who might otherwise have passed by. By closing time, Evelyn was exhausted but satisfied. Whatever consequences came from her actions, she'd done what she believed was right. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Evelyn arrived early to prep for the day, enjoying the quiet before Miguel and Tanya arrived. She was mixing batter for her famous blueberry pancakes when a familiar rumble reached her ears. The distinctive sound of a motorcycle engine. Then another and another, moving to the window. Evelyn's breath caught. A line of motorcycles stretched down the highway as far as she could see, their chrome flashing in the morning sun. At the front, a familiar figure, Ray, his leather vest now joined by at least 50 others behind him, with more still arriving. Oh my, she murmured, setting down her mixing bowl. By the time she stepped outside, the parking lot was filling with motorcycles, riders in leather vests emblazoned with the Hells Angels insignia dismounted, removing helmets and gloves. There were men and women of all ages, some grizzled veterans like Ray, others younger but with the same self-assured presence. Ray approached, looking healthier than when she'd last seen him. The dark circles under his eyes were gone and he moved without the stiffness of injury. Morning, Ms. Evelyn, he said, extending his hand. Hope we're not too early for breakfast. Evelyn shook his hand, finding her voice. Never too early, but I'm not sure I have enough pancake batter for... How many are you? Ray glanced back at the still arriving motorcycles. About 200, give or take. 200? Evelyn's eyes widened. Word travels fast in our community, Ray explained. When I told my chapter what happened, how you stood up for me when you had every reason not to, they wanted to thank you properly. A tall woman with silver-streaked hair tied in a braid stepped forward. I'm Diane, she said. Chapter Vice President. What you did for Ray, that took guts. Others murmured agreement, nodding respectfully toward Evelyn. Well, Evelyn said, gathering herself, I suppose we'd better start cooking then. Miguel and Tanya arrived to find the diner already open and a line of leather-clad customers stretching out the door. Their shock quickly gave way to action as Evelyn explained the situation. 200 bikers? Tanya whispered, tying on her apron. The health inspector would have a fit. Then let's hope he doesn't stop by today, Evelyn replied with a wink. What followed was the busiest day in Sweet Home Diner's history. Every booth was filled with bikers standing 3 deep at the counter. They spilled outside, sitting on their bikes or leaning against the building. Plates balanced on knees or shared on motorcycle seats turned into makeshift tables. Miguel worked the grill like a man possessed, turning out plates faster than seemed humanly possible. Tanya darted between tables, her initial nervousness fading as she found the bikers to be exceptionally polite customers. And Evelyn moved through it all like a conductor leading an orchestra, directing, assisting, and somehow managing to learn dozens of names along the way. The Hells Angels ordered everything on the menu, multiple times. When one group finished, another took their place, but no one seemed in a hurry to leave the property entirely. They lingered in the parking lot, sharing stories and laughter. By mid-afternoon, curious locals began to appear, drawn by rumors of 200 bikers descending on Sweet Home Diner. Some stayed in their cars, watching from a distance. Others, braver or more curious, ventured inside, where they found not the chaos they expected but a surprisingly orderly scene. Around 4 o'clock, Ray called for everyone's attention. The diner fell silent as he stood on a chair, looking around at his assembled brothers and sisters. "Most of you know why we're here," he began. "This woman, Evelyn Carter, she stood up for one of our own when she had no reason to. She put herself between me and corrupt cops. She risked her business and her reputation for a stranger in a leather cut." Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. "In our world," Ray continued, "loyalty and respect aren't given easily. They're earned. And Evelyn has earned both." He raised his coffee mug. "To Sweet Home Diner and the lady who runs it, to Evelyn." The response came in a wave. Deep voices joined in a toast that seemed to shake the windows. Then a biker Evelyn hadn't met stepped forward, placing a small velvet pouch on the counter. "From all of us," he said, "a token of respect." Inside the pouch was a pendant, a miniature version of their insignia, crafted in silver and hanging from a simple chain. "This marks you as a friend of the Hells Angels," Diane explained. "It's not given lightly." Evelyn's eyes misted as she slipped the chain over her head. "I don't know what to say." "No need to say anything," Ray replied. "But there's one more thing." He nodded to another biker who stepped forward with an envelope. "What's this?" Evelyn asked, taking it. "Today's bill," Ray said with a smile, "plus a little extra." Inside was enough cash to cover not just the day's food but 3 months of back rent on the diner. Evelyn gasped. "We can't possibly—" "You can and you will," Diane interrupted firmly. "And that's not all. Starting today, Sweet Home Diner is officially a recommended stop on our routes. Any angel passing through will stop here." "You'll never eat alone again," someone called from the back, generating laughter. As the afternoon faded into evening, the bikers gradually departed, not all at once, but in small groups, each stopping to thank Evelyn personally. Some promised to return the following month. Others said they'd spread the word to chapters across the country. By closing time, the parking lot was nearly empty. Only Ray and a few others remained, helping to clear the last tables. "I never expected this," Evelyn said as she and Ray stood in the doorway, watching the sunset. "That's why it happened," Ray replied. "You didn't help me expecting anything in return. That's rare in this world." He mounted his motorcycle, then paused. "Some people see these vests and assume the worst. You saw a person first. That's a gift, Ms. Evelyn." After they were gone, Evelyn, Miguel, and Tanya sat in an empty booth, exhausted but elated. The day's earnings were more than the past 2 weeks combined. "So," Tanya said, twirling the pendant around her finger, "I guess we're friends of the Hells Angels now." "I guess we are," Evelyn agreed. Miguel shook his head in amazement. "Never thought I'd see the day." Outside, a few locals drove slowly past, eyeing the diner with new interest. The story would be all over town by morning. How Sweet Home Diner had hosted 200 bikers without incident. How those same tough-looking men and women had shown more respect and generosity than many regular customers. Evelyn fingered the silver pendant resting against her collarbone. The world was full of surprises if you were willing to look past appearances. Her late husband had always believed that. Now, watching her once struggling diner filled with new life and possibility, she couldn't help thinking he would be proud. Some risks, it seemed, were worth taking after all.